What's a test suite? As our C projects get increasingly complex, as you've seen in class, we like to split program functionality between a variety of .c and .h files. With what we've seen thus far in class, in the labs and assignments, there have been times where we like to have our program's logical functions separate in their own .c file, with the client or user-side functionality that makes use of said functions in another. All that said, to double-check proper functionality, we find it also useful to create a separate .c file that solely tests the functions that make up the backbone of our program. But how can we do that all in one project, considering our client-side and our testing .c files both have main functions, and we can only have one? The answer is with a test suite that uses multiple targets in our Makefile. And how would we go about setting that up? Simple. All we do is add a testing target to our Makefile that uses the .c file with the main function set up for testing, rather than the endproduct.c file with our usual main function. Let's take a look at an example. Alrighty, so first let's quickly walk through this example program setup I've created. Long story short, I've created a multi-file program that uses a function called Sumarray that goes through an integer array and returns the sum of all of its elements. Here in Sumarray.h, you can see that I simply define the prototype of the function between include guards. Then in Sumarray.c, you can see I wrote the code for said function, and it just iterates through the whole array to calculate the sum. Then, in SumArrayClient.c, I have all my client-side or user-friendly stuff, if you will. It prompts the user for the size of the array, and then to enter the array to be summed, making use of my SumArray function in my other .c file. Next, I have my SumArrayTesting.c file. I have two functions here, testSumNegative here, and testSumPositive down here. And what these do is they each execute 3 test cases, using negative and positive integers respectively to test the SumArray function with. Then in main, I simply call the two functions and get all those tests executed. As you can imagine, the possibilities are endless in how you can write test functions. Now here's where it gets exciting, the Makefile. You can see I have quite a few targets, but it's not as daunting as it seems. My very first target here is what we'd normally see in a project, compiling the client-side program from my respective object files. You can also see further down that I've separated the compilation of the object files just for explicit organization's sake, so these 3 right here. Now what's probably new is this test target that makes use of Sumarraytesting.o instead of Sumarrayclient.o based off of Sumarraytesting.c naturally. This way, I can create an executable that uses the main function of my testing file instead. And one last note. Don't forget to put the name of your testing executable into your clean target, should you give it a name, like right here. So now, in my terminal, I can call make, or more explicitly, but it has the same effect since it's my very first target, make client. And that will create my Sumarray client executable, and then we'll run it. All right, and let's do it with an array of size 3. We'll do the numbers 1, 2, 3. And awesome, it spits out 6, just like we expected. Now let's try calling makeTest. And then we'll execute the new testing executable. And as you can see, it spits out all the results in my tests. Now this is awesome. Based off of what we were expecting, all looks good to me. But you can see that you'd have to manually check the results. And that's all right, but could I automate this to make the testing process even smoother? Well, of course. Let's go back to my code and we'll make some changes. All right, I've gone ahead and duplicated my SumArrayTesting.c file into a new file called SumArrayTestingAutomated.c and changed my testSumNegative and testSumPositive functions to execute an assert function call rather than simply printing the output. This way, we can simply pass the assert function a statement we wish to be true. So here, for example, I'm expecting the result of my SumArray function call to be -4, and then it will raise an assertion error in case that's not true. So now I'll go ahead and update my Makefile accordingly with this new file name, and then I'll make and run it again. Now one thing to note before you go ahead and use the assert function is you just have to include the assert.h header file at the top of your code so that it knows where to look for the assertion function. All right, so let's go ahead and run makeTest again, and then we'll run the test build. As you can see, it does nothing, but that's as expected, since no error should have been raised from the assert function. To show the opposite, Let me go change the iteration condition in my for loop in my SumArray function to create a bug, and then we'll see what it outputs. Coming back now, we'll run make test, and then we'll run the executable. And as you can see, it threw an error, and it tells us which one failed as well. Now, you can see from all of this that it doesn't take much to create a robust and automated test suite, and in the end, it proves to be super helpful when testing your labs and assignments, especially before handing them in.